The night my husband told me to take my personal belongings and leave, he was sitting on a sofa I had paid for, in a house built on land my grandmother left me, under a chandelier I had found, bought, and installed myself, every single piece of it. He said it like he was doing me a favor. Tiana smiled like she had already won. "I'll take exactly what's mine," I said, and I just set down the divorce papers, quietly. Neither of them looked up. Neither of them asked what I meant by that. That was their first mistake, and it would not be their last. My name is Imani Washington, 31 years old, and I used to believe that a home I had spent 7 years building a life, my own money, my own sleepless nights, was the one thing nobody could take from me. Until one day, the man I built it with had just handed it to someone else, without blinking, without apology. Let's go back to that Friday evening in Atlanta, because this story didn't start with the divorce papers and tears. It starts with a mother who decided, quietly, coldly, completely, to protect what she built. It was late October. The heat has finally let go, and the air smells like wood smoke from somewhere down the block. Light coming in low and golden through the front windows of the house on Cascade Road. Our house sat on a quiet cul-de-sac off Cascade Road. A brick colonial, wide front porch, Japanese maple in the yard that I had planted myself 3 springs back. It had gone deep red that week. I remember noticing it when I pulled into the driveway. I had been at my mother's house in College Park that afternoon, dropping the kids off. Zion, 9 years old, had his tablet and his overnight bag. Layla, 7, had her strawberry print pillow and 4 stuffed animals she considered non-negotiable. I told my mother I'd be back by 7. She said she was making gumbo. Everything felt ordinary. I came back to Cascade Road just before 5. The front door was unlocked. I walked into the living room, the room I had spent 3 weeks designing, down to the caramel linen on the sofa and the reclaimed hardwood under my feet. And there they were. Darius Jefferson, my husband, 36, 6'1", good charcoal dress shirt, mother of pearl buttons, sitting on my sofa, holding the hand of a woman named Tiana Simmons. He looked at me and didn't flinch, didn't let go of her hand. "Go ahead and take your personal belongings, Imani." His voice was flat, certain. "Whatever's yours personally, the rest stays here for us." Tiana uncrossed her legs and smiled at me, practiced, sweet. She was wearing a silk blouse I recognized. I had designed it as a gift set for Darius 2 Christmases ago. He had given it to her. She tilted her head and said, "He told me everything. You two already agreed. Everybody keeps their own things. You're getting older now, honey. Time to step aside and let the younger generation move in." Before I could say a word, Darius walked to the front door panel and changed the fingerprint lock code, right in front of me. Then he picked up an old suitcase, one of mine, and set it outside on the front steps. The sound it made when it hit the porch. Heavy. Final. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I reached into my bag, took out the divorce papers I'd been carrying for 2 days, and set them on the coffee table. The hand-carved walnut one I had driven to Savannah to find. "You're right," I said. "I'm going to take exactly what's mine." Darius smiled, self-satisfied. Tiana glanced up at the chandelier. That beautiful reclaimed fixture I'd found at a shop in Inman Park, with the open, hungry look of a woman already redecorating in her head. Neither of them understood what I meant. Not yet. He changed that lock to see me flinch. He never considered what it looks like when a woman who has already decided simply doesn't. Now, before you keep watching, I want to ask you something honest. If someone treated you the way Darius treated me right in that moment, would you have walked out quietly, or would you have said something? Drop your answer in the comments. I have a feeling this one is going to start a conversation. And stay with me, because what happened next didn't start that Friday evening. It started 3 years earlier with a $40,000 check and a contract Darius forgot he ever signed. 3 years before that October evening, Darius came to me with a dream and a problem. The dream was his own company. Mid-size construction consulting, Atlanta-based, commercial contracts across the Southeast. He had the connections, the confidence. What he didn't have was money. The problem was that I did. I have a degree in interior design from the Savannah College of Art and Design. 5 years building a client list, hotels, restaurants, private homes, and careful with every dollar I made. So when Darius came to me with his dream, I listened, I researched, and then I wrote a check. $40,000. My money. I negotiated the lease on his first office on Peachtree Street, helped him hire his first 2 employees, and in exchange, quietly, legally, with a real attorney and a real contract, I retained 51% of the company as an anonymous shareholder. Not because I didn't trust my husband, but because my mother's voice was always there. Baby, love is love, but a signature is a signature. Darius knew. He signed the paperwork himself. By year 2, he had forgotten it existed entirely. Around the same time, I built the house. The land it sat on, that lot off Cascade Road, had been left to me by my grandmother, Dorothy May Washington. She had owned that property since 1978. When she passed, she left it to me alone, not split among family, to me, by name, in a will properly probated in Fulton County. I built that house on inherited land, with my money, in my name. Darius's name was on a secondary construction loan for his portion of the costs. That was it. The full extent of his legal claim. But Darius didn't think about details like that. He thought the way some men think, that whatever is in the house is the house, and whatever is in the marriage belongs to the man who calls himself the head of it. Back then, he still complimented every room I designed, said I had a gift. Then he changed. I found out about Tiana on a Tuesday afternoon in April, 7 months before that October Friday. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a receipt for our taxes. I handled all the family finances, of course I did, and I opened Darius's laptop to check a shared folder. Instead, I found a message thread, 11 months deep. I sat down slowly, read everything. And what I found wasn't just an affair. It was a conversation about my home. Tiana had asked about the chandelier in the living room, wanted to know if it was staying. Darius wrote back, casual as anything, "Yeah, Amani bought it, but she won't need to know anything about that." She won't need to know. My heart clenched so tight I had to put one hand flat on the desk just to steady myself. They weren't just ending the marriage. They were planning to take everything I had built, the furniture, the rooms, the life I had made after my kids went to sleep, and act like it had always been theirs. I closed the laptop, sat at the kitchen table a long time. Then I called Renee. We had gone to SCAD together, family law and asset protection now. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. "Start a folder," she said. "Every receipt, every transfer, every text you can document without breaking any laws. Do not change a single thing about your behavior. Do not let him know you know." I started that folder the same afternoon. I didn't confront him, didn't cry in front of him, didn't go through his phone while he watched. I just documented. Every invoice, every payment, every wire transfer, dated and labeled. The lawyers later told me I was smart. I wasn't being smart, I was being a mother. 3 weeks after I found the messages, loan paperwork. Darius had filed it using our shared marital assets as collateral. To buy a Mercedes, registered to an address in Midtown I recognized as Tiana's. He used what we built together to buy a car for the woman he planned to replace me with. My hands went cold. I added it to the folder. One evening around that time, Darius sat across from me at dinner with practiced concern on his face. "The kids need both their parents in the same house, Imani. You know that." I looked at him. "Did you think about the children when you brought Tiana into this house while they were asleep down the hall?" He had nothing. He looked away first. Every piece of furniture in that house was a memory. Zion laughing loud at the dinner table, telling stories about school like they were the most important news in the world. Layla rubbing her eyes and pressing herself into my side at the end of the day, not saying anything, just needing to be close. Darius used to call me obsessive for caring so much about every detail of that home. He was about to lose every single detail of it. I kept moving. Quietly put a deposit down on a townhouse in Kirkwood, close to a good elementary school, close to my mother, everything the children and I would need, already waiting. Entitlement doesn't announce itself. It grows in the silence where gratitude should have been. Darius had stopped seeing my work as work so long ago that he genuinely believed he deserved what I built. That blindness was going to cost him everything. Then I found out about the invitations. Printed ones, cream cardstock, gold lettering. Tiana had sent them to her social circle, people with money, people with expectations, inviting them to a housewarming party at my address. 7 o'clock on a Friday evening in October, planned for the exact night she expected me to have already cleared out. She had been telling her friends about the chandelier, the custom kitchen, the hardwood floors, planning her debut in my home. That was the moment I called the moving company. 6 o'clock sharp, 1 full hour before the first guest. Every night those last few weeks, after the kids were asleep, I'd sit at the edge of Layla's bed and smooth her hair. I'd look in on Zion through the cracked door, sprawled across his mattress the way children sleep when they feel completely safe. And I'd make them a silent promise. I will not let you grow up inside someone else's lie. My folder got thicker every week. Darius went to work, came home late, smiled at his phone. He had no idea the storm was already at the door. What happened when those 2 trucks pulled up, 1 hour before Tiana's guests, is the moment this story becomes something neither of them will ever forget. The morning of that Friday, I woke before sunrise at my mother's house in College Park. Layla was asleep beside me, one small arm thrown across my waist the way she always slept when something was off, even when she couldn't name what. Zion was in the living room on the pull-out couch, already watching something about space or engineering before the rest of the world was awake. My mother had started the coffee downstairs. I could smell it. I lay still a few minutes, just breathing. Not the brittle kind of calm, not holding myself together. The deep, settled calm of someone who has already done everything that needed doing and is simply waiting for the moment to arrive. I got up, dressed carefully. Ivory blouse, slate gray culottes, block-heeled mules. Pinned my curls up. Kissed Layla's forehead without waking her. Told my mother I'd be back before dinner. And I drove back to Cascade Road for the last time as a resident. The 2 trucks arrived at exactly 6 o'clock. 8 men, professional, quiet. Led by a foreman named Gerald, compact, businesslike, the kind of man who has seen everything and is surprised by nothing. He carried the itemized property list on a clipboard, every item numbered, every number tied to a receipt or legal document, all of it court-filed. Gerald rang the front doorbell at 3 minutes past 6. Darius answered in a bathrobe. He had been expecting no one. "Good evening, sir." Gerald's voice was polite but had no softness in it. "We're here on behalf of Mrs. Washington. Court-filed property itemization. We'll be starting in the living room." Darius's face went blank before it went angry. That blankness, that half second where his brain just could not process what was in front of him, told me everything I needed to know. This was a man who had spent months planning and maneuvering and had never once considered that the woman he was maneuvering against had been doing the same thing, more carefully, for longer. "What?" he said. Gerald handed him the paperwork. From somewhere inside the house, Tiana's voice floated out, bright, excited, completely unaware. "Baby, is someone at the door? First guests aren't due for another hour." She appeared in the hallway, dressed for the party, hair done, heels on inside the house, a glass of something sparkling already in her hand. She looked at the 2 trucks idling at the curb, at the 8 men with furniture blankets folded over their arms. Her face moved through several expressions fast, and none of them were good. "What is this?" she said. "Ma'am," Gerald said, "we're here to retrieve Mrs. Washington's documented personal property, all itemized. We'll be as efficient as possible." They were very efficient. 6:15, the caramel linen sofa, wrapped and loaded. 6:30. The farmhouse dining table I had found in East Point, the one we'd eaten 1,000 meals at, disassembled and gone. The custom window treatments came down. The kitchen pendant lights came down. The built-in bookshelves, custom installed, documented as removable personal property per Renee's precise legal language, came off the walls in sections. Then Gerald's crew reached item 74, the chandelier. Gerald read it aloud as they set up the ladder. Item number 74, living room chandelier, reclaimed fixture. Purchased by Mrs. Washington, Inman Park, Atlanta. Price documented. Installation documented. Darius went pale. The specific kind. The kind that has nothing to do with light. Tiana came running from the back of the house, hair coming loose, voice climbing. "You promised me the lights were staying. I told everyone about those lights, showed them pictures. You said the kitchen, you said the floors." Darius turned on her. "Lower your voice." "Don't tell me to lower my voice. You said this was going to be ours. You promised me." "I said stop." "I have people coming in an hour." They argued in the front hallway in front of Gerald's entire crew, while the chandelier was carefully disengaged from the ceiling above them. I watched from the driveway. I did not go inside. The custom hardwood floors came up next. The wide, dark honey reclaimed boards from the salvage yard in Decatur, documented as a floating installation on an underlayment that remained legally mine. The crew worked in sections, no drama. The premium soaking tub in the master bath, purchased by me, installed under a separate contract in my name, was removed and crated. The gold-accented front door hardware I had ordered from Savannah came off its hinges. Darius tried to stop the truck. He physically stepped in front of it in the driveway, bathrobe and all, arms out. Gerald showed him the court filing again. Calm. Darius had no legal ground. He stepped back. He turned to me instead. His voice cracked open. Fury and desperation tangled together. "You are destroying everything, Amani. You are tearing this apart." I walked toward him, slowly. Stopped about 10 feet away. "Darius, you told me to take my belongings." I kept my voice even. "I am taking my belongings." "You know that's not what I meant." "I know exactly what you meant," I said. "And I know exactly what I own." One of Gerald's crew came to the front door carrying the large framed family portrait from the hallway. The four of us at Piedmont Park on a Sunday afternoon, the kids in their good clothes, everyone squinting a little into the afternoon light. Layla laughing at something Zion had just said. "Madam," the crew member said, "family portrait as well?" I looked at that photograph, at my children's faces. "Yes," I said. "My children deserve new memories in a new home." Darius watched that portrait go toward the truck, and something went out of him. Some internal structure that had been holding him upright just gave. His shoulders dropped. He sat down heavy on the front porch steps, bathrobe and all, and stared at the street. Tiana's guests started arriving at 6:45. A woman in a wrap dress with a champagne bottle came up the front path, slowed when she saw the trucks, slowed further when she heard the sound of a fixture being uninstalled. Two men in sport coats stopped at the bottom of the steps and looked at each other. A couple with a gift bag stood on the sidewalk, not sure whether to proceed. The house through the open front door was already unrecognizable. Raw walls where the built-ins had been. Bare concrete subfloor in the foyer where the hardwood had come up. Wiring hanging from the ceiling where the chandelier had been. Sofa gone, table gone, lights gone, window treatments gone. A construction site. Tiana stood on the porch, hair half undone, heels on bare concrete, and faced her guests with nothing behind her. Nothing she had promised. Nothing that had ever been hers. There's been a... Darius, tell them... Darius said nothing. Still sitting on the step, her guests left one by one, quietly. The champagne woman put her bottle back in her bag. The couple turned around without a word. The two men in sport coats were gone before the last truck was sealed. By 7:30, we were done. What happened to Darius on those steps wasn't just humiliation. It was the specific collapse that comes when a man who built his entire identity on being the provider, the one in control, watches that image dissolve in public, in front of people who were supposed to admire him. The bathrobe, the empty house, the guests who came for a celebration and found a shell. Every prop of that performance gone. Public exposure does what private confrontation never can. It removes the audience a person has been performing for. And without that audience, some people simply don't know who they are anymore. Tiana had walked into this believing she was the winner. She had been handed promises instead of paperwork, words instead of deeds. She was about to learn the same lesson Darius had spent 3 years failing to learn, that the woman who keeps the receipts always has the last word. I stood on the sidewalk and looked at the house on Cascade Road one last time. Dark windows, empty rooms, wire hanging where the chandelier had been. The Japanese maple burning red in the evening light, completely indifferent to everything that had just happened. I hadn't torn anything apart. I had taken back what I built. The home was never in that address. It had always been in me. The final confrontation, the one that would close everything, was still 2 weeks away, and it happened somewhere Darius never expected me to have already built a new life. For 2 weeks after that Friday, I heard nothing from Darius directly. I heard things through my cousin Renata, who has always had a gift for collecting information and an equally powerful inability to keep any of it to herself. She told me Tiana had left, that after the full scope of Darius's promises compared to what he actually controlled became undeniable, Tiana Simmons had filed a formal complaint against him for misrepresentation, said he had deceived her about his financial position, about assets he had no right to offer. She wanted accountability for the time and trust she had given a man who had sold her a future built entirely on someone else's foundation. Whether that went anywhere legally, I don't know. It wasn't my concern. My concern was my children, my new home, and the work I was building again. The townhouse in Kirkwood was full of morning light. We had moved in over a long weekend. My mother, 2 of my closest friends, the beautiful chaos of people who love each other doing something that matters. Zion had immediately found the room with the best Wi-Fi signal and staked his claim. Layla had stood in the center of her bedroom with her eyes closed, turning slowly in a circle, getting the feel of it. When she opened her eyes, she said, "This one is mine." "It is completely yours," I told her. I had also rented a small office suite on Edgewood Avenue for my design practice. 2 clean rooms, a drafting table, a conference table near a window that looked out onto a dogwood tree gone bare for the season, but with beautiful bones. 2 existing clients whose projects had continued without interruption. 3 new inquiries already in my inbox. I was building. I am always building. On a Wednesday morning in early November, my assistant knocked and told me, quietly, that my husband was in the reception area. I corrected her gently, my soon-to-be former husband. I finished my call, straightened the folders on my desk, went out and asked him in. Darius was standing near the window. He had his attorney with him, younger, carrying a thin folder, projecting confidence he hadn't yet earned. Darius himself looked nothing like the man who had sat on my sofa 2 weeks earlier, in his pressed charcoal shirt, certain and dismissive and in complete control. His shirt wasn't ironed. Eyes red at the edges, the large silver watch still on his wrist, the one he had bought himself when the company's first year came in strong. But it looked wrong on him now, a prop from a role that no longer existed. I brought them into the conference room, sat down. The attorney opened his thin folder and began. Willful removal of marital property, potential liability for damages, unilateral disposal of shared assets, grounds for countersuing. He spoke for 4 minutes. He sounded confident for about 90 seconds. I let him finish. Then I opened my folder, the real one, the one Renee and I had built carefully over 7 months, and slid the first document across the table. The house was built on a parcel of land deeded solely to me by my grandmother's estate in 2019. Recorded with Fulton County. Darius's legal claim is limited to his contribution to the secondary construction loan, which was repaid in full. Payment records are here. Second document. Every item removed from the property is listed with the original receipt or proof of purchase in my name. Nothing was taken that wasn't legally mine. The court filing preceded the removal by 72 hours. Everything was done in proper legal order. Third document. In 2021, Darius signed a shareholder agreement granting me 51% of voting shares in his company as an anonymous partner in exchange for my $40,000 capital contribution. I activated those rights in October. Separately, the company had accumulated unpaid state tax obligations for 3 consecutive quarters. The Georgia Department of Revenue placed a hold on the business accounts as a consequence of those existing obligations. I didn't create that situation. That was the result of financial mismanagement that started long before I activated anything. I folded my hands on the table. As of this week, the mortgage holder on Cascade Road has begun assessment proceedings. Without the business income and with the existing loan complications, the property isn't sustainable. That's also not something I caused. The attorney had stopped writing. He was looking at Darius. Darius wasn't looking at him. He was looking at me. The attorney leaned over and said something low. Darius gave one small, barely perceptible shake of his head. The attorney stood, excused himself, and stepped out into the hallway, and for the first time in what felt like years, it was just the two of us. Darius had walked into that office still carrying the posture of a man with options. A lawyer, a folder, grievances. But there is a particular silence that falls over a person when they realize in real time that every move they plan to make has already been accounted for. It's not the silence of losing a fight. It's the silence of watching a building simply not be there anymore. Imani hadn't ambushed him. She had just been more prepared, more clear-eyed, more honest about what she owned, legally, emotionally, morally, than he had ever bothered to be. Darius sat across from me and didn't speak for a long moment. The silver watch caught the window light. The bare dogwood outside was perfectly still. "You built all of it," he said, finally. His voice was rough, the way a voice gets when a person hasn't been sleeping. Everything. The house, the company. You designed the rooms and paid the invoices and raised the children and kept every record, and you built all of it, Imani. He stopped. His jaw worked. "I was wrong," he said. "I know that doesn't change anything, but the children, Zion and Layla," I said, "are going to have a beautiful room each in a home where they feel safe. They're going to go to a good school close to their grandmother. They're going to grow up watching their mother stand in her own dignity. That's what they're going to have." And their father? His voice cracked on the last word. I looked at him. This man I had married at 24 in a church on Auburn Avenue. This man I had cooked Sunday breakfast for, whose kids had his jaw and my stubbornness. The man for whom I had written a $40,000 check because I believed in something that turned out not to be what I thought. "Their father is still their father," I said. "That's between you and them. It has nothing to do with me anymore." He nodded slowly, the way people nod when they're accepting something they cannot change. His eyes went wet. He didn't try to stop it. For the first time in all the years I had known him, Darius Jefferson sat in front of me without any armor, without any performance, without any confidence borrowed from what I had built. He had lost the house, the business, the woman he chose over his family, who had then chosen to leave him. The carefully maintained image of a man who had it all figured out. And he sat in a wrinkled shirt in my conference room, and he wept. I felt no triumph. Only the deep, clean sorrow of something that did not have to end this way. That sorrow matters. Imani wasn't cold. She wasn't performing strength for the room. She was a woman who had loved this man, built a life with him, and was sitting across from the wreckage of everything they could have been, watching him finally understand what he had thrown away. The tragedy of people like Darius isn't that they're monsters. It's that they're ordinary. ordinary in their carelessness, ordinary in their entitlement, ordinary in how long it takes them to see the value of what they had, until it's gone. And by then, seeing it clearly only makes the loss more complete. I stood up, extended my hand across the table. Professional, composed. He looked at it, shook it. His grip was nothing like it had ever been. I walked him to the door, watched him go down Edgewood Avenue, past the bare dogwood, until he turned the corner and disappeared. Then I went back inside, sat down at my desk, and got back to work. Because the story doesn't end with the confrontation. It ends with what came after. And what came after was something far more powerful than any of it. November in Atlanta is its own kind of beautiful. The leaves come down slowly, one neighborhood at a time, and the light goes low and golden, and stays that way through the short afternoons. I drove the kids to school every morning. The elementary school with the bright blue doors and the community garden out front, 2 blocks from our townhouse in Kirkwood. And on those rides, we'd pass streets lined with maples, gone amber and rust and burgundy, and Layla would press her face against the window glass and name every shade she saw. "That one's cinnamon," she'd say. "That one's, Mama, what's darker than red?" "Crimson," I'd say. "Crimson," she'd repeat, satisfied, like she was adding it to a private catalog of beautiful things she intended to keep. These were the mornings I had protected. The ordinary, golden, unremarkable mornings that make up the actual fabric of a child's life. Not the big moments, not the celebrations. These small commutes with the window fogged and the radio low, and a 7-year-old naming colors like she's doing important work. This was what I had been fighting for. Not the chandelier, not the hardwood floors, not the legal documents. Those were instruments. This was the reason. The townhouse came together the way I knew it would. I'd been making homes for other people for 10 years. I knew what a home actually needed. Honest light. Materials that don't pretend to be something they're not. Spaces that tell the truth about the people living inside them. I painted Layla's room the color she'd chosen herself at the paint store on Memorial Drive. A warm, peachy blush she'd held up to the afternoon light for a full 3 minutes before declaring it correct. I found a small wooden desk at an estate sale in Decatur, put it under her window where the morning light would fall across it when she sat down to draw. Zion's room was, by his own design, a command center. He had submitted his specifications in a written list, which I respected enormously as an organizational achievement, while still declining roughly half the requests. He got the desk. 2 monitors, not 3. Shelving at the height he specified for his model airplane collection. The good internet. He was largely satisfied and said so with the measured approval of a 9-year-old trying very hard to seem like a reasonable adult. These children. Lord, I love these children more than I have words for. There were hard nights too. I won't pretend otherwise, because the women who understand this story deserve honesty and not just the beautiful parts. There were evenings after bedtime when the house was quiet, and I'd sit at the kitchen table with both hands around a mug of tea, and the weight of 7 years would settle across my shoulders. 7 years, the exact age of my youngest child. I had been married for precisely as long as Layla had been alive, and now I was 31 years old, starting over in Kirkwood, in a life that looked nothing like what I had planned standing in a church on Auburn Avenue in my grandmother's earrings. I thought about the woman who had driven 40 minutes to Buckhead to choose the right sofa, who had stayed up past midnight over floor plans and tile samples, who had believed with her whole heart that building a beautiful home would protect the people inside it. She wasn't wrong to believe that. She was only wrong about which home she was building. The real one, the one that lasted, had been inside her all along. And no moving truck, no court filing, no dismissive sentence spoken across a living room could touch it. One evening in December, Zion came and sat beside me at the kitchen table while I was going over invoices for a new project. He spread his homework on the other side, close to me, but with his own space, which was exactly his nature, and worked quietly for a while. Then, without looking up from his paper, "Mama, do you think we're going to be okay?" I put down my pen, looked at him, 9 years old, curly hair, his father's jaw, my eyes. A question in his face that was much older than 9 and deserved a real answer. "We are not just going to be okay," I said. "We are going to be better than we have ever been. I promise you that." He thought about it the way he thinks about things, carefully, taking his time. Then he nodded once, like he had reviewed the evidence and found it sufficient. Went back to his homework. I went back to my invoices. Outside, a December rain came down soft and steady. Through the kitchen window, I could see it moving in the glow of the porch light. I sat with my son at our table in our home, and I thought, this is it. This is the thing I was protecting. Not the chandelier, not the floors. This exact moment. A boy and his mother at a kitchen table in the rain, doing ordinary things in a place that was entirely and honestly ours. Grief and relief don't take turns. They sit together, which is the part nobody tells you. Imani could grieve the marriage and still feel the clean relief of safety. She could mourn the years and still be grateful for the outcome. That is not contradiction. That is the honest complexity of a woman who loved fully, prepared wisely, and chose her children over her own comfort every single step of the way. I heard through Renata that Tiana had gone back to her family's home in Macon. I bear her no malice. She was young and greedy, and she believed a man who told her whatever the room required of him. That's its own price to pay. It's hers, not mine to collect. The house on Cascade Road went dark. The mortgage company completed its assessment. The property, stripped of the custom fixtures and floors and handmade details that had made it more than a structure, was placed in the bank's hands. The Japanese maple I'd planted would still be out front, I imagined, going deep red every October, regardless of who owned the lot beneath it. Trees don't concern themselves with the legal arguments of the people standing in their shade. Darius called one evening in early December, asked carefully, without entitlement, whether he might see the children at Christmas. I said yes, of course he could. They were his children, and they loved him, and that relationship was entirely separate from everything between us. We worked out the arrangement calmly, like two people who have moved past the burning stage and arrived at the cooling part. Before he hung up, he said, "You were always the smartest person in that house." I said, "Good night, Darius." No anger, just the plain truth of it. I meant it the way you mean goodnight to someone who was once the center of your life and is now simply a person on the other end of a phone with whom you will always share the two most important things you ever made together. My mother came to dinner that Sunday, brought gumbo and opinions in equal measure. We sat around the round oak table I had chosen. Simple, honest, 4 chairs, and ate and argued gently about whether her gumbo needed more field powder, and watched Layla perform an interpretive dance she had apparently been choreographing for days in secret and had decided dinner was the appropriate venue for its premiere. Zion ate with one hand and held a book with the other, and occasionally offered unsolicited criticism of the dance, which Layla ignored entirely with the serenity of an artist who has already made her peace with her critics. My mother looked at me across the table, didn't say a word, just gave me that small, private nod. The nod of a woman who has watched her daughter walk through fire and come out the other side with her back straight and her children fed and her house full of light. I nodded back. There is one more moment I need to tell you. One small, specific thing that told me in my bones that we had fully arrived somewhere new. It involves the chandelier. The chandelier from the living room on Cascade Road now hangs in the front room of our townhouse in Kirkwood, Atlanta. It took 3 weeks to rehang it right. The ceiling height was different, we needed a longer chain, a new canopy bracket, and my electrician, a patient, precise man named Terrence, who had worked with me on 3 previous projects and had long since learned that I notice everything, had to come back twice to get the placement exactly right. But we got it right. We always get it right. The evening Terrence switched it on for the first time, Layla gasped. Not loud, not dramatic. Just that small, genuine, involuntary sound a child makes when something lands exactly as wonderful as she hoped. She was in the center of the front room in her pajamas, hair in 2 loose puffs, holding her stuffed rabbit by one ear. She tipped her head back and looked up at the light spreading across the ceiling. "Mama," she said quietly, "it looks like stars." "It does," I said. She thought about it a moment, then, "Did you always know we were going to bring it here?" I looked up at that chandelier. I thought about the afternoon I found it at the reclaimed lighting shop in Inman Park, tucked in a back corner, and something in me had known immediately. I thought about paying $1,100 for it in cash, about Gerald's crew carefully disengaging it from the ceiling on a Friday evening in October while Tiana watched and Darius sat on the porch steps in his bathrobe, about the care with which it had been wrapped and stored and carried here. I knew it was ours, I said, and I knew that wherever we went, it was coming with us. Kayla considered that with the seriousness she brings to things that matter. Then she nodded once, satisfied, and went to find her brother to tell him about the light. I stood in that front room alone for a few minutes after she left. Just stood there, looking up. There is something about reclaimed light that has been somewhere, been through something, been carefully taken down and carried to a better place, that feels different from anything you could buy new. It holds the memory of where it came from without being trapped by it. It just shines, quietly, without needing to explain itself to anyone. I thought about the version of me who had hung it the first time, in the house on Cascade Road, 30 years old, 2 small children, a marriage I was still trying to save, with good lighting and reclaimed hardwood, and the stubborn belief that beauty could hold a household together if you chose it carefully enough. She wasn't wrong to try. She just hadn't understood yet that you cannot design your way out of a man who has already decided you don't matter. I understood it now. The townhouse was quiet around me. Zion's voice drifted from his room. He was on a video call with a school friend, explaining something with the authority of a child who has recently acquired strong opinions about spacecraft. Layla was padding back down the hallway, having apparently decided that informing her brother about the light was urgent enough to interrupt whatever he was doing. "Zion, come see. Mama's chandelier looks like actual stars." "I'm on a call. I don't care. Come see." A pause, then the sound of a chair rolling back. I smiled at the ceiling, at the light. Sometimes I look up at it and think about what Tiana said that October evening. "You're getting older now. Time to step aside and let the younger generation move in." She had looked at that chandelier with naked desire, told her friends about it, built an entire housewarming around its existence in what she believed was her home. And here it hangs, in mine. I don't say that with gloating. I say it because it's true, and sometimes the truth is symmetrical in a way that feels almost deliberate, like the universe occasionally decides to make a point. I sat down on the small sofa I had found at an estate sale in Ormwood Park. Good bones, needed reupholstering, exactly my kind of project. And I let myself just be still for a moment. Anita Baker playing low from the Bluetooth speaker on the kitchen shelf. Same speaker, new shelf, same music. The smell of the dinner I had made still warm in the air. Layla's drawings on the refrigerator held up with little strawberry magnets. The same ones from the old house, because she had insisted on bringing them. The same magnets, new refrigerator, new walls. That is how it works, I think. You carry the things that matter, and you set down the things that were only ever weighing you down. And slowly, without making a ceremony of it, you realize the weight is gone. I had grieved this year, more than I let anyone see. There were nights I sat at this kitchen table long after the kids were asleep and felt the full cost of 7 years. Not just the betrayal, but the accumulated weight of every moment I had made myself smaller to make room for a man who was quietly planning to take everything I had built and hand it to someone else. That grief was real, and I honored it. I did not rush past it or pretend it wasn't there. But grief and relief don't take turns. They sit together, and slowly, as the weeks passed, the relief began to take up more of the room. I didn't need Darius Jefferson to apologize to me. An apology would have been for his peace of mind, not mine. What I needed, what I had been quietly building for 7 months across folders and legal filings and a deposit on a townhouse in Kirkwood, was the knowledge that I could stand on my own ground and hold it. And I do, every single day. I am 31 years old. I have a design practice with real clients and a real reputation and a small office on Edgewood Avenue with a window that looks onto a dogwood tree I am very much looking forward to seeing bloom in spring. I have a mother who comes to Sunday dinner with gumbo and opinions in equal measure. I have a son who submits written proposals for room modifications and a daughter who names colors like a poet and choreographs dances for unwilling audiences of 3. I have a front room with a chandelier that hangs like stars. And I have something that nobody, not a cheating husband, not a calculating other woman, not a fingerprint lock code changed in my own doorway, was ever going to take from me. A sense of my own worth that does not depend on whether someone else recognizes it. The knowledge that every document I signed, every check I wrote, every sleepless night I spent building something real was an act of love. For my children, yes, and for the woman I was choosing to be. The house on Cascade Road is empty now, windows dark, rooms hollow. The Japanese maple I planted goes deep red every October, patient and indifferent, rooted in earth that once belonged to my grandmother and will always, in some true sense, belong to her still. And we are here, warm, fed, safe, together. That's the whole of it. That's everything. The story reminds us that the woman who keeps the records, reads the fine print, stays up past midnight over the things that matter. She is never as powerless as the people taking her for granted have convinced themselves she is. It reminds us that a home is not a structure. A home is a choice you make every day about where you put your love, your labor, and who you protect with both. It reminds us that entitlement doesn't announce itself. It grows quietly in the space where gratitude should have been. And the people who forget to say thank you are usually the last ones to understand what they had. It reminds us that when someone tells you to take your belongings, you had better know exactly what belongs to you. Not just the objects, the time, the work, the sacrifice, the documented, receipted, legally protected proof of everything you built while they weren't paying attention. It reminds us that a mother who knows her own worth does not leave empty-handed. And it reminds us that the light, however long it takes, always finds its way to the right room in the end. My name is Imani Washington. I built something beautiful. And then I built it again, better, stronger, and entirely my own. If this story reached something in you today, leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you know a woman who needs to hear that her quiet strength is not invisible, that it is, in fact, the most powerful thing in the room, please share this with her tonight. Thank you for listening. Take good care of yourselves.